everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the participants joining us from various regions. And welcome to this webinar on leveraging the extensions library for creating test authoring in Virtuoso as part of the Virtuoso Mastery Enablement webinar series. In this webinar, we'll demonstrate Virtuoso's low-code capability in order to extend and automate various edge cases using something called as extension by writing JavaScript functions inside Virtuoso. We'll show various ways to write extensions or create extensions in Virtuoso, and we'll also demonstrate the existing collection of extensions that can be directly reused by you in your journey while automation. So in this webinar, for the first time, we also have something called as quiz, where the participants would be able to participate and answer these quiz. At the end, the quiz would be based on the topics that were covered throughout in this session. So it request all the participants to stay attentive during the session, since all the questions would be from the topics that we cover in the session itself. And top 5 performers of the quiz will be rewarded with Amazon gift cards worth 20 Great Britain pound or 2000 in INR. So stay tuned till the end and all the best. And with that, I would like to hand it over to our speaker today, Manish, who is a senior solution architect here at Virtuoso. And Manish is the expert who builds various solutions and extensions for our customers and partners. So with that, over to you, Manish.
Thank you so much, Abhijit. Hi, everybody. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everyone based on where you are. Glad to be here. This is my first time hosting a webinar, so I'm pretty excited, and I hope the gift card adds the excitement to the participants as well. I'll try and structure this webinar across different sections that we plan to discuss, so that we still have enough time to go through some examples, because we've got lots of theory parts to cover. There's a lot of examples for people who are already aware of Virtuoso and have been using it. They might be able to relate to a lot of these things. And for people who are still new to the platform or haven't seen the platform, we've tried to get things basic as well, so that they can get a basic hang of how things work. So I'm a little bit conscious of time as well, so let's get started. And I'll quickly share. I hope everything is set up, logistics, with cross-check. So if anybody has a problem, you've got the chat window and the Q&A window. Please drop in any messages, or if you can't hear me, if you've got any problems with the screen, and one of the team members will help you out. So let's dive right in very quickly. I'll run the agenda of this. We'll do a quick overview of Virtuoso and basics of Virtuoso, which is the recap test authoring using NLP. Maybe a couple of slides, and then we'll go right into extensions. Like I said, there's a lot of things to discuss, from basic levels as well as to some of the advanced things. We've got cool things to discuss as well for people interested in generative AI and all of the capabilities. So do watch out for that section as well. And then the extensions library, which we have been building and have been improving over here at Virtuoso, will also be displayed, demoed, and very useful utility, I believe. It's an ever-expanding library, so we hope to keep on adding more and more features and more extensions, so people can get a lot of value out of Virtuoso reading it without having to scratch their heads and write a lot of code. And then we'll see some of the basic theoretical concepts of extensions, how the flow of control of data takes place. So quick overview, for people who are aware of Virtuoso, have been using it, I'm sure you're already aware of this, but I'd like to slightly maybe spend 30 seconds on this, talk about some of Virtuoso's capabilities for people who are new specifically. What is Virtuoso? It's a test automation platform in simple terms. It's cloud-based, it's AI-focused, it's a lot of things. Probably can't sum it up all in one slide, but some of the key features that you would see is Virtuoso using its NLP, all of these AI capabilities, helps you automate your web applications with a lot of less amount of manual effort. I think that's a crude way to put it. There's a great number of features that we support, which are not even present on this slide right now, but some of the key ones that I just want to touch through: low-code test automation. A lot of things can be performed directly using natural language. Self-healing, which is, for people aware of the industry, they would all obviously know, and I'm sure they'd appreciate the self-healing concept of Virtuoso, and how you can have your tests remain healthy and keep on improving your test regression packs. AI assistants, we've been talking about it, the world has been talking about it, and we'll see some of its capabilities in this call as well. So I'm most interested in displaying that in real time, so people who have not used it can probably see a practical enterprise application of generative AI, because I think that's the buzzword over the last year or so, but we've been able to squeeze it and find some practical application of it. So that's very interesting. Virtuoso enables you to perform functional tests end to end with your APIs, visual regressions. We've got a very interesting webinar next month on APIs. We'll be covering some APIs through extensions in this one as well. So people interested and who enjoy working with APIs, I'm sure you would have a little bit of fun. And we've got the quiz at the end, which will focus on some questions around APIs and stuff like that. So yeah, do watch out for those. Cross-browser testing enabled as well. You can test your applications across different browsers, different environments, Windows, Mac OS, Linux, mobile-based. So all of those things. And a quantum shift to the left of your sprint board, basically. So the earlier you find bugs, the earlier you test, then your regression packs are more healthy, and so on and so forth. Very quickly, again, just a quick recap how we write tests. Natural language, like I said, you get feedback while you author the tests. So what you see is there's a small video on the right-hand side is actually the way we author tests. So people who've already written journeys in Virtuoso, have written test cases would very well relate to this. Natural language, very helpful. You can see a live preview browser on the side, which we will see during this session as well. And you've got a bunch of advanced developer tools as well, just like you would have on any browser. Console, network logs to track whatever API calls are being made, your HTML elements and all of that. So it's like a browser within your browser when you're authoring the tests, and that's the real power of Virtuoso because you can test it in real time and then very quickly make edits to your test cases. I can't really think of a lot of platforms that perform that. So I think that's one of the real key factors of Virtuoso. Now, having said all of this, let's dive into this key agenda of this particular session, which is extensions in Virtuoso. And I'll quickly start off maybe with a couple of theoretical points. What is an extension? So I've been, with Virtuoso for a year, working very closely with some of our customers, and I see the participants list, some of the people I've worked with. There are some new faces as well. So a lot of people have had extensions and they've had in their journeys, they have been using extensions. A lot of the people may not be very well aware of extensions. So what is an extension? If I have to answer it in the most crude manner, it would be just a JavaScript code. It's literally nothing more than that. There are nuances to it in terms of how this JavaScript code runs, where it can run, what other external libraries it can refer. And I'll try and cover, time permitting, as many things as I can in this session, but we've got a great set of documentation as well, which the team will be sharing with you at the end of this call, and you will receive those in emails as well. So you can always have this as a ready reference in terms of what you want to use. Let's try and see what extensions, what the basic concepts are. Most of this session will actually be practical, so people who are not big fans of reading a lot of text, not to worry. This is just to establish some of the basics, and also for people who are new to the platform, we will be covering a lot of practical aspects. We'll be writing some extensions as well. So Virtuoso stands as a no-code or a low-code tool, right? But there's a lot of interesting and incredibly powerful things in your test automation packs which you can do using a little bit of code. This is personally my favorite feature of Virtuoso, and I'm not being biased at all. Ever since I have been working with this platform, extensions have been the most useful feature that I have found personally. And I think that's a real value add in terms of what Virtuoso can do and how it takes the product onto a next level. Using the scripts that you can write inside Virtuoso within the Virtuoso journey at a browser level, these enable you to add a huge amount of processing power, like making API calls, making complex conversions, data manipulation, HTML manipulation, right using JavaScript inside your journey. So it keeps you within the product itself. You don't have to write external scripts onto your system, or you don't have to use a third-party service. Some of the key things around Virtuoso, the power of JavaScript, everything is based in JavaScript. Extensions are actually JavaScript files. So they reside on Virtuoso, they reside in your Virtuoso organization. The only language that's supported is JavaScript. And there's a very good reason for that, which is for people who are aware of browser-based testing or browser front-end technologies. That's the technology that is used for all website manipulation and all programming on the web. So that's why it's JavaScript. We've got a very good editor that we'll be doing a lot of work on in this session. And it provides a lot of good shortcuts, just as you would on, let's say a Visual Studio Code or your other editors that you may be using for coding. So people who are not new to coding, I think they should enjoy the UX of the editor because it's quite useful. We'll talk a lot more about Write Code with AI, the enterprise application of Gen AI that I've been talking about. I'm quite excited to demo that to everybody. There are some interesting aspects around using external libraries, running your scripts with async await, particularly when you're making network calls, API calls, running scripts asynchronously. And we'll be covering all of this. And I would particularly just maybe stress to the people who are here, do stay with us till the end. Some of the things that are here on the screen are actually a part of the quiz as well that will run right at the end. So that will help you. So let's not spend too much time in theory now, and let's get into the actual stuff. Okay, so once again, just for people who are new, this is how a typical Virtuoso platform will look like. I've got a test case authored, which we call Journey in Virtuoso lingo. And I have created a very basic journey over here, which is actually going onto the Virtuoso website, clicking on the Get Started form so you can contact somebody from your sales side. And I'll just give it a run through from the very beginning. But before I get into that, there's one step that I want to perform, which I want to show it to everybody, which is the very basics of what an extension looks like. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to delete everything that is over here. And let me save this. So we don't have this extension anymore. What I'm going to do is I'm going to write a simple JavaScript code. Again, very, very simple, to add two numbers, which have been passed as parameters over here. And I'll try and sum up these numbers so that you can directly use them in your journey. So let's do this. Give it a good name. Okay, we'll add two parameters. And all we'll do is we will do 1 plus 2. And we will call this function over here. So there are a couple of things that I want to just demo while we do this. This is people who are aware with programming constructs would be very easily able to find out how the inputs are coming in, how are they being processed. And I'll quickly cover this right at the end of the call as well, where we will be discussing about, how the inputs are being managed, how the output is being managed. And I've got a diagram which will probably make things a lot more simple as well. But this is a very simple function that is supposed to sum up two numbers that come as inputs. Now, I want to demo one thing which is not going to give a response that you would probably be expecting right now. So I will pass two inputs, 2 and 2, and the logical answer is that the sum should be 4. Let's see if it is 4 indeed. It's not. So the reason for that is, and again, I want to stress on this because we see quite a lot of people running into issues with these kind of things. When we pass inputs via Virtuoso, the default is string data type. So in order to fix that, what I'll simply do is I'll just add a function, native JavaScript function. Like I said, everything is native over here. It supports every JavaScript IDE, normal functions, and libraries. I'll just update this. I'll run it from the beginning again, and let's see what the output is. The output is 4. So just a very quick note on what we are trying to do. Next up, like I said, I'm just trying to simulate a browser-based action where the journey will go onto Virtuoso's homepage, and then it will go to the Get Started section, and then it will try filling up a form. So let's run this journey and see the preview browser over here. So as you can see, there's a Get Started button on the top right. The test case will click on that. And I'm going to be using two extensions over here. So let's reach the form filling step. The journey will pause, and I'll resume what I wanted to share about it. So as you can see on the journey, and I hope everybody can see the preview browser, which is on the right-hand side as well. There's a form that asks for a first name, it asks for a surname, and a lot of other things. So what I have done actually in the background is I have created two extensions, which is again JavaScript codes. And these extensions, using pure JavaScript, are going to be creating or returning random names. Now, the way I am generating these random names is from a list of names, basically. So I've got an array of 4 names. You can see QA, tester, manager, lead. And every time this function is called, one of these 4 values will be returned back to the journey. Similarly, I've created another function for last name. And this is just a little bit of fun. It's the names of all of our teammates that I put it in the array as surnames. And once we run this extension one after the other, You will see a first name and you will see a last name. So let's do this. Let me add another pause actually for later. So what you will see over here is the first extension has been executed. Now the first extension picked up a value called lead, as you can see in the form. If you check on the extension step in particular on the side effects, you'll also be able to see the variable that it got. And in the next step, I've just written the same in the text box. The second extension, which was trying to fetch the surname from the second extension, fetches the name, Uzo, who is technically a lead in our team. So as you can see, this is quite accurate. So using this, the extension has generated a random names from a list of names and a random surname from a list of names. Similarly, you can extend the functionality to multiple things. You can use external libraries to generate random data from a bunch of different things. You can generate emails, you can generate random addresses, random phone numbers. Helps a lot when you're testing with dummy data on your staging and your development environments or your SIT environments. Let's let this journey run up until the last step. There's one interesting thing that I also wanted to share. And I know some people may have some questions on this later, and we'll be happy to answer this. We've also got within Virtuoso extensions the capability to write expressions, inline expressions, again, pure JavaScript. Very, very good documentation available on this on the website. I'd strongly recommend, please do check it out. But I wanted to show one quick demo of this as well. So now you see that the cursor has stopped at the company email text box. So what I'm going to do is from the first name and surname, I'm just going to try and generate an email. So the first name is lead, the surname is Uzo. I'm just going to do lead.uzo@virtuoso.qa. Common intuition would probably say that I can write an extension for this. But what I've instead done is using plain JavaScript, just with following the correct syntax, I've added an inline expression over here, which concatenates 4 strings. It picks up the first name, follows that with a dot, follows that with the surname, and then adds a suffix at virtuoso.qa. When I run this step, you would see that the email will get populated over here in the text box. And that's all. I mean, there's a lot of steps, of course, in this form to fill it, but that's not the main purpose of this discussion, right? So I just wanted to explain 2 different kinds of extensions and also using the power of that extension into inline scripts. So for a lot of very quick use cases, like the email use case we've just seen, you may even avoid adding extensions. Simple NLP and a combination of NLP and JavaScript could help you achieve similar kind of functionality. So that's the very basics of extensions. That's my basic journey that I wanted you to have a look. And we'll just switch over back to the presentation and we'll go through a little bit more theory over here. And the fun part, extension creation using AI. We've been hearing a lot, a product team or engineering team had a lot of feedback received from us and from the customers. And this is something that has actually been there for a while. I'm not sure how many people have had the chance to play around with it, but this is a really interesting feature. And I would strongly recommend people who may be writing some complex extensions to try and make use of this, because this is actually very, very useful. You can write simple and complex functionality over here. So very similar to how people may have used, other Gen AI tools. We've got an AI assistant inside Virtuoso when you create an extension. I'll quickly show you a demo as well. You just give it a prompt and it can generate an extension, a JavaScript code with it. The interesting part is that you still have the same flexibility, of course. I mean, you may want to tweak some things later, right? You may not be satisfied with the exact way that the code has been structured. So you may want to play around with it. So it gives you that flexibility as well. And it has the same power of other LLM processing agents. So you're not restricted to a certain thing. You can ask it to create simple extensions. You can ask it to create complex extensions. Let's have a quick demo of this as well. So I've got another journey spin up over here. Let me switch over to the extension. I have got an extension over here. Let me again delete this. Let's start off everything from scratch. I've got another journey which I will start off from here. Ignore the failures because we'll go through that. It's actually been set up to fail so that we can demo some things in this session for everybody to understand. Let's do this. Let me show this to you. So you create a simple extension. This is the blank page where you start off from when you create an extension. This is an interesting logo. This says, okay, you need help, take me. This is actually our AI assistant. It's still in beta phase. But we have seen some people who have been using it and we have received good feedback. And we keep on improving this model as well so that it gives more accurate results. Let's try and do this. I will ask this AI assistant to write, sorry for the typos. Let's write a JavaScript function to give me the product of two numbers. So we did a sum example, the addition example. Let's do a multiplication example. The UX of it is pretty neat. You just click on the plus button and the whole thing gets copied over. And it creates very nice comments as well. So, I mean, probably you don't need a lot of comments for a small extension, but particularly when you're writing complex extensions, API calls, maybe data manipulation, the prompt can get transferred over into your comments, and it gives maybe, helps with version control. Somebody else is using this extension. They get a lot of value just by reading the comments in terms of what the extension is doing, what the logic is, what the parameters are, and all of those things. Let's quickly run this. There's default inputs being given over here, 5 and 10. Let me just save this extension. I've got another journey set up over here. Got a pause in here. Let's see. So when I run the second journey, what this is going to do is this is going to call that particular extension, which we just edited. And the output should be 50, right? Let's see if we are actually indeed getting the output as 50 or not. We won't get the output as 50. Now, this is the point I also wanted to discuss deliberately so that we can see. This points towards a debugging use case. So we receive it all the time that people have been using extensions, but they find it difficult to see what the values of variables are. Now, our AI agent did a great thing. It gave us the console log. Now, this is the perfect debugging statement if you want to understand where your code is going wrong, where it's printing values or not returning the right thing. So let's run this again with the console output. And like I said at the start with Virtuoso recap, we've got a very powerful browser inbuilt, which has a browser inside a browser. So it's got all your standard browser functionality, console, network calls, whatnot. So on the console, you would see that actually we have 50 as the output over here. Let me just run it again for clarity. So what happens over here is that the journey calls the extension. The extension does 5 into 10. And it tells you by console log using this step, line number 31. It tells you that the output should be 50. So you are actually indeed getting the correct output, but we're not handling the output correctly. So the reason for that is that we are returning the value 5 into 10 from the function into the calling statement, but we're not returning it back into the journey. Now, if this sounds complex at all, please do not worry. We've got a nice diagram at the end, like I said, that will talk about the flow. But just bear in mind that when you write standard code, you handle inputs and outputs by returning the values to the calling function. But within Virtuoso, you just have to be careful because you call extensions from outside. You call it from inside a journey. So you have to make sure that the value is actually being returned to the journey as well. So what I will do is very simple. I'll just return the result. Sorry for the typos, please. So I'll just return the result, save the extension. Let's run this journey again. So I haven't changed the debugging statement, so I should still get console.log saying that 50 is the output, right? And I should also have the side effects tell me that the value in response variable is indeed 50 instead of not applicable as it was before. So this is how I have handled the output correctly, and I have returned this back into the journey. So this line 32 returns the value in here. So that's how it does. Similarly, because we're talking about AI, there's another extension that I had created previously using an AI prompt to make a simple API call, a get API call to a public URL. Sorry, yeah. So what this does is, I wanted to show two applications of the generative AI component, not to show that it performs just very basic actions like sum or multiplication. I gave it a prompt saying that make a get API call to this URL, and I will call this from the journey, and we'll see the response. So let me first take you to this URL. Now, anytime you open a web page, as people may know, that is a get API call, right? So if I open this web page, I will get the response in JSON format on the screen. Whoops. Probably not printed yet. Let's see. I may have cached it. Let me run this in the journey and we'll see. So I'll just go one step further and I'll call this API. Let's see what the output is. So this is a public endpoint and it has all of these over here. So this API receives the response in JSON format over here. And then, as you can see, it uses fetch. You can also use Axios, and we'll talk about Axios in little detail right after this section. It makes an API call, get API call to this URL. It handles the response, returns the data. In case of any error, returns the error. And then we do the same thing over here on line 36 and line 40. So again, just to talk about the data flow, line number 20 returns the values back to the calling function, which is make get API call on line number 33. Line number 36 actually returns the data back to the journey. So if I never wrote return data, this variable will never be populated. So that's just around how we are handling responses, because we see a lot of people have been writing extensions perfectly written, but they don't see the output because they've never been returning the value back to the journey. So it's a simple single keyword that can solve these problems. It's a fun part. There's one more API call that I want to show. Hopefully we will have time for other things as well. This is an interesting one, and we've got some errors deliberately set up so that we can show some of the interesting things. This is actually an API call that is making that is hitting a Virtuoso endpoint, and for your project's organization, for your organization ID, it gives you some of the details about your projects. So for people who have used Virtuoso, they would probably know when you go into your Virtuoso organization, you get an organization ID right at the top. This is a demo organization that I have set up for me. Its organization ID is 1507. I've got 4 projects over here named differently, and I'll get all of this data at a high level using the API in another journey, which I'm just going to demo. So when I first run this API, let's run this call. This is going to fail, and I'll talk about briefly why this will fail. Let's have a look at what the error is. The error says that request failed with status code 404, which means not found. So why is it not found? Let's quickly debug this by going over to the extension. This is the extension. Now, what I'm doing over here is there's nothing wrong with the code, but there's just one thing wrong in the inputs. If you quickly take a look at the inputs over here and the inputs over here. So people with an eagle eye would probably have seen the inputs are in different order. And I deliberately set this up so that you understand that there is an importance to the order as well in which you pass the inputs to the functions or to your extensions. So we're expecting URL first. We're expecting token, which is your API token, as the second input. And the extension is actually doing it the other way around. It's taking the input first, sorry, the token first, and then the API URL second. So let's switch it over and see what happens. Let me just do this. It's running, and the step passes. Let's see what the output is. There you go. We've got 4 objects over here. And let's see. These are the projects. Manish test project, test covers card, extensions V2. Where have I seen this before? Webinar. These are the projects that I have over here. Webinar, Manish test project, extensions V2. All of these are present over here. So this is a simple API call that I have made to Virtuoso's API to get my project details. Simple as that. This was just to show some of the complex capabilities that our extensions can support. Things like, using GenAI to make simple or complex extensions. Things like making API calls, handling responses, debugging using console.log statements, correctly using return statements to ensure that you do pass your output values back into the journey and not just into the extensions. Let's go over the next section. So we'll get back to a little bit of theory now. Extensions library. So this is a very interesting thing, and I've got a very nice example set up for this as well. But I want to talk about this in a little bit of detail right now, because I think we have time right now. We're on track, I hope. So extensions library, as the name might suggest, it's kind of, I wouldn't call it a repository like a GitHub repo or something, but it's a library. It's a set of extensions that we have enabled, which can be used as is directly. I'll run an example as well in this call. The power of these are that these are tried and tested with a lot of requests that we have received from our customers. These are built as a result of feedback from lots of internal and external discussions in terms of what are the common scripts or extensions that people use, what are the things that would add a lot of value over here. One of the things that we saw was about handling PDF files, because lots of customers that we support have use cases where they generate a PDF on their website and they want to view it and they want to, maybe perform some actions with it. So I'll show you an example, but before that, let's just complete the query aspect of it. So as you can see on the screen, extensions library, it's a wide array, wide collection of extensions. We have some simple extensions. We have some complex extensions as well over here. I know a lot of people have already been using it. The library is very user-friendly to use, I would say. The UX is pretty neat. You just click a button and the extension gets imported with all the dependencies into your project. And I'll do all of this practically right in front of you in the next 2 minutes. And it's our effort to keep on expanding and adding more things to this library. We've got a wide collection of things that in my backlog as well we have got right now, and we will soon be adding these to the documentation and opening up this documentation for everybody to use. But right now we've got a limited collection. So let's head over to that and see the utility of this, what I've been talking about. So this is the extensions library. I've got people, some people may already be aware of this list. I say it's an ever expanding list. It used to be a smaller list, but our effort is indeed to keep on adding more and more based on the feedback we receive from customers. And you may see there's one extension called View PDF Files over here. This is the extension I was talking about. Let's go over and see what this does. It's actually very simple. Code is pretty simple. It talks about a little bit of what the extension does, the text. It tells you how to use it, and it gives you a button to just click and import the extension right into your organization. So at this moment, we've got 2 buttons over here, add extension, which is for all of our live customers. You click this button and it takes you to your organization and adds the extension into your project. I am using the free trial environment for the purpose of this webinar. So I will click on here and it will take me to my project. I can add it at an organization level. I can add it at a project level. I just want to add it at the project level for now. I'm on the project called webinar. I'll add this. And, boom, I have this with all its complexities, all the inputs, all the resources. And I know I missed a little bit about the resources, and I'll quickly cover this as well right after I run this extension. So what is this? 107-line code imported to your project, ready to use in 1 or 2 seconds. And let's head over to a use case of this. Let's do this. So I've got a third-party website where I could access PDF reports very easily. And I wanted to click on that website. Let me run through this again and generate a PDF. So what this journey is actually doing is it looks for this website, which is sitereportpro.uk. It looks for a particular report called bold condensed. It clicks on that report, and after it clicks, it opens that report in a browser. But I don't see anything on the browser right now. I have very specifically said navigate to the last downloaded file. But that is the problem. So this is the query that we received a number of times from our customers who had this particular use case, that they've done a lot of computation on a journey and a PDF report has been generated and they want to view it or they want to open it in a new tab, but they just can't do it. So we've got a simple solution now because we have, as you remember, added the show PDF extension. So I'll just write show PDF and I'll pass the last downloaded file. So once I do this, almost like magic, almost instantaneous, you can see the PDF got loaded onto my browser. So that's the utility, because show PDF, if you look over into the code, it has got certain features which support loading of .pdf files at a browser level. So it is to mimic and come as close as to your natural browser within Virtuoso. So that's the power that we want to achieve, and that's what we have achieved with this particular extension, and that's what we want to replicate through other extensions, and we keep on adding them in the library. So my recommendation, please go through the documentation. Please have a look at the other extensions that we have. We get a lot of queries around some of these commonly used, particularly for API level. There's a very interesting extension for OTP authentication as well, which people have been using. So please do try it out and share your feedback. That really helps us improve this whole library and expand it to, so that everybody can derive the maximum value out of this. One thing I very quickly wanted to go back to is, I think I can because we're almost at the end of what I wanted to present, but let's go to this journey again. And I missed it, so, sorry for that. Remember the API call that I was making to the Virtuoso API endpoint to get all of the projects inside my organization. So I never talked about resources. This is a very interesting construct. Let me first remove this, save this, and then I'll tell you the value of this. What resources does is, now, if you remember, Virtuoso runs at a browser level. So the extensions run at a browser level. Now I have removed the resources. I haven't explained what it does, but let me show it to you in action, and then you'll probably appreciate it more. So let's wait for this step to fail. Yeah. So we're trying to make an API call to the Virtuoso endpoint and get all of the projects for my particular organization. But I don't see any projects, and I see an error over here. It says Axios is not defined. So people aware with HTTP networking and making API calls would be aware that Axios is an HTTP library that allows you to make network and service calls like an API, get, post, put, delete, all of these kind of calls. Now, people who are aware with JavaScript and have used Node.js on their local systems would know that on your terminal, or if you're using a local application like Visual Studio Code, you can install Node.js, you can install all of the different dependent libraries, and you can make, you can do a lot of things. You can't really do that using Virtuoso because we run on a browser. So how do you install Node.js, which is supposed to be downloaded on your system or a server? But we've got a way around it. So that's the resources part of it. So Axios is a library using which you can make API calls. So why don't we just add a CDN link, and I'll tell you what CDN links are. If I take you to this URL, which I've just added, this is a CDN link, which stands for a content delivery network link, to a URL, which has got all the functions available. You don't need to read through this, but this is just for reference what it does. It's got a lot of functions available in terms of how do you handle API responses, how do you make API requests. So, and there are a bunch of different CDN providers that we support. We support JSDeliver.net, we support Amazon AWS, and a lot of other things. So that's where resources actually come in very handy. And now I will save this extension and make the API call again. And hopefully, well, I say hopefully, it will pass successfully. And we should have the correct response as we were having before. Yeah, there you go. We have successfully made the API call. We've got the same 4 projects from our organization. Everything is fine again, just by adding the resources. So that's a great utility of having resources over there. That's pretty much it in terms of the practical aspects of things. I wanted to take maybe 3-4 minutes, and I think we are pretty much on time. I wanted to take 3-4 minutes just to discuss a little bit more theory so you can win your Amazon gift card, because we've got some interesting questions coming up based on the next 2 slides as well. So we have seen a lot on how extensions have been written. We have used extensions inside journeys as well, right? We used, I think probably had 5 or 6 different examples. So the interesting part of this is, how do you use extensions? It's actually quite intuitive, and people may have already seen this. So the syntax actually is, you write the extension name, you pass any inputs if you need, you pass an output value using the returning statement, and it just works like that. There's also another way, which you may see with most of the extensions that I have written. It writes execute. It picks it up automatically. So if I have to make an API call to the webinar/API extension again, I need not write execute. I can obviously do this, but even if I don't do this, this will automatically prefix execute, because that is the syntax for writing an extension inside Virtuoso. That's a pretty useful thing. You can pass input parameters like we saw. we passed a few input parameters earlier. You can handle the output. We discussed a lot around handling outputs. We discussed situations where the output was not handled correctly using the return statement in the code. And then we handled it. We handled the API responses as well. And this is the final slide, actually. So this is the last concept for regarding extensions that we'll be covering in this session. And it talks a little bit about how the flow of control goes on. Like, so what basically happens is that this is just to, you will get this diagram, you'll get this slide as well in an email after the session. But this is just to give you a basic information of how the data flow and how the control flow works using an extension. So everything inside Virtuoso is happening inside a journey on a browser. So you've got the journey, which is the starting point and the end point. So if you look at the arrows, they all start at the journey and they all end at the journey. You write and execute make API call, let's say, for example, extension over here. You pass a couple of inputs to it, and you expect a response from the extension back. So this is the NLP that you write. The NLP sends the two inputs into the extension. So the way it works is NLP resolves the extension using its name. So it finds that, okay, there's an extension being called make API call. Let's go to make API call. Let's pass input 1 and input 2 as the two parameters. It passes it over here. The input values are then processed into the function. The function does all of the complicated or the simple processing, whatever it is. It could be sum of numbers, it could be complex API calls. At the end of it all, it returns the output value. And that is what the extension does. That is where the extension stops working. The next part is for the extension to send the response back into the journey. And this is where the return statement becomes very useful. Because if you remember the example where we didn't write the return statement, we didn't get the output. We got NA in the output. So if we never wrote the return statement, this last arrow never would have happened. So if you write the return statement, it returns everything back to the journey, and it can be used for different things later on in your journey. So this is a simple concept on how the data flow happens inside a Virtuoso extension. And that brings us to the end of this session. We've got another very interesting session around Virtuoso's capabilities in the next month. And we've got a host of other things that I will let Abhijit talk about as well. So thank you so much for everybody who has patiently been listening for the last 40 odd minutes. And, I see a lot of questions in the chat. So we'll try and hopefully we've answered some through the session, and we will try and answer as many as we can after the session as well. And over to you, Abhijit, please.
Thank you, Manish. Thanks a lot for driving this session so wonderfully and explaining us the extensions concepts so well. And with that, let's move on to the next part of the session where we answer the questions. I see a few questions, so probably you can read them through and also answer them. So I see a question from Marco. Marco is asking, is it possible to import external libraries in Virtuoso, like Selenium library commonly used in robot framework?
Sorry, I was speaking on mute. Hi, Marco. Thank you for your question. It's a great question. There's not a very simple answer to it, but I have a response to this for sure. So if you've got the Selenium library, which is commonly used using the robot framework, if there's a CDN resource available for this readily, you can for sure import it and use it in the Virtuoso extension, because it will define the functionality and you will be able to use all of those functions. So that is the short and that is a simple answer to it. The complicated part of it is that not all external libraries, particularly maybe some of the complex libraries, they may not be available externally. So the long way to do it is to have that library and all of its dependencies with you, and then you host it on a CDN. Sounds like a lot of effort, but that is unfortunately the tricky part of it. So we're trying to find another way through which we can support as many libraries as possible. There are a vast number of libraries that are available through CDN links, but there are some which unfortunately are not readily available. So we are also trying to collect a basic set of libraries that are widely used or required by customers. So we could probably host it on our CDN. I don't have ready-made timelines on it available yet, but I think the short answer then would be that if there's an external library that supports this, you're good to go. If not, you may have to host it at least for the time being. So
Thank
may not be the ideal answer for you, Marco, but I hope it helps. Yeah, Jeet, please go on.
Sure. Thanks, Manish. And we have another question in the chat section. So I would request all the participants to post the questions in the Q&A section and not in the chat section. So we'll take few that we have already received. So another question from Laya Raja: when to use inline extension versus when to use external extension?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question. Thank you for this. So inline expressions are both inline expressions and extensions are JavaScript. So the answer really is it depends on you. I would, as a good practice, definitely recommend extensions if you've got more than one line of code. So the example we did, just concatenating a simple string. There are a lot of small tidbits that you can get done in single step extensions. So you could probably replace those with inline expressions. But typically, when you're handling complex things, making API calls, handling responses, converting one data format into another, they would end up requiring 10 or 15 or 20 lines of code by the very minimum. So I would strongly recommend using extensions in those use cases because it also makes sort of a code repository within your project. So you can always refer it, and the good part about having an extension is that it's reusable, it's one time effort. Whereas if you write a very large inline expression and you have to use it in multiple places, you end up copy pasting or rewriting it again and again. Whereas an extension allows you to make it modular. You can have inputs, you write the code once and you play around with it n number of times.
Thanks, Manish. And yes, from the best practices perspective, it is always good to have it maintained as part of the extension, like in the extension section, so that it can be reused across multiple journeys rather than having to copy paste it. Thanks for mentioning that as well. So we'll take two more questions before we launch the quiz. So there is another question by Christian. Do we need to maintain the similar page object model like we do in Selenium and call those functions in actual flow?
Uh, Hi, Christian. Thanks for the question. I'm sorry I don't follow it completely because I'm not very well versed with Selenium. So if you can help out with another statement or a follow-up question, that will help. But the best I understand, and I'll try and answer to the best of my knowledge and understanding of your question, uh, the actual flow or the way the inputs and outputs are handled are just as shown in the session, right? So it's very standard, just how normal coding or normal functions would use this. So you have to ensure that, and the variables that we were talking about, they could actually be variables within the journey. They could be environment variables. They could be data table variables. So you can define them. You can hard code it as well. So there's a range of possibilities that happen. In case this is not the satisfactory answer, please feel free to reach out and we'll try and gather more from you.
All right. So in the interest of time, I'll launch the quiz first, and meanwhile, we'll also answer some questions which
Sure.
we have open. So let me launch the quiz now. So all the participants would be able to see the quiz now. In case you're not able to see the quiz, let us know in the chat section, but we'll keep it open for 5 minutes. There are 10 questions in the quiz, and the best five performers of the quiz will stand a chance to win Amazon gift card worth £20. Okay, we are seeing good participation from the audience. So 2 minutes past the quiz. The quiz would be live for 3 more minutes. In case any of the participants is unable to view or see the quiz window, let us know in the chat section. It seems one of the participants is not able to see the quiz. I would request you to make sure that you minimize the Zoom window and try to reopen it again. There should be two windows for Zoom open for you. Okay, we see a lot of participation. One minute to go before we end the quiz. In case any of the participants were not able to view the quiz, please make sure that you have updated the Zoom client version to the one that supports the quiz wizard for you. Final 30 seconds. Last 10 seconds in case someone has recently started. Okay. So thank you everyone for joining us. And I hope you liked the session and you got to learn something new today. So thanks Manish once again for driving the session so well. And with that, we would like to announce the next session as part of the Virtuoso Mastery Enablement webinar series, which is on Virtuoso's API test automation capabilities. This session would be driven by Jaswant Malik, who is the team lead here at Virtuoso for the Partner Enablement Department. This session would be on 25th of July, 2024, and it would be hosted at the same time, which is 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. IST, which is 12:30 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. London time. And in this session as well, we'll be having the quiz. So please make sure to join in the beginning and stay tuned throughout the session. And 5 participants would be rewarded with Amazon gift card worth £20 again in this session. And the topics we'll be covering in this session would be Virtuoso's API Manager, API testing capabilities in Virtuoso, API test automation using Virtuoso, and automating sequential APIs in Virtuoso. So this would be a two-part series wherein the first part would be covering the foundational aspects of API test automation. There would be another session on API test automation in the month of August, uh, which would be again driven by Jaswant. And as you can see, we have other subsequent sessions lined up for the entire year. So with that, I would like to thank all the participants for joining us today, and we hope you enjoyed the session. Feel free to share your feedback about the session in the chat section. And after the session, you will also receive a link for the session feedback we would like to hear from you. So please make sure to spare a few seconds of your time to share your feedback about the current session as well as the past sessions that we have hosted in the previous month. Thank you all. Have a great day ahead. And with that, I will ask some of our panel members to share some important links using which you can further enhance your Virtuoso skills by taking the free online training certification courses that are present on our LMS, and also links to our documentation and the recorded webinars of the previous sessions. So just stay tuned for 30 more seconds before you share that and then close the session.